So as you heard, leadership often takes on many definitions and often extends far beyond just the title. Leadership is subjective and often defined by actions taken and empowering those around you. Today, 3 presenters will share their stories of leadership with you. The presentations will take a slightly different format than what we've seen before, as Bettina mentioned. And while there won't be a formal Q&A, there is a break, which is great, immediately following. So I encourage everyone to seek each one of these folks out afterwards and ask your questions at that point. So I'm going to dive right into this. I'm thrilled to introduce our very first speaker, Kirstie McCool, CEO of CityBuilders.
Hello. I'm going to talk a little bit about startup junkies, but before I do, a little side note. On February 1st, 2003, America experienced a national tragedy. We lost 7 brilliant astronauts that day aboard the Space Shuttle Columbia. Many of you may recall where you were on that fateful day. For me, I happened to be at the landing strip at Kennedy Space Center waiting for Columbia to come home. You see, my brother, Willie McCool, was the pilot of the Space Shuttle Columbia that perished that day. We were invited by NASA to be there to welcome them home, along with all the other crew's family members. For the next year after the accident, NASA carefully reconstructed the shuttle piece by piece. During that time, I live here in Orlando. I spent a lot of time at Kennedy Space Center being part of this process. I met many incredible people there, and to a person, they all wanted to understand what had happened, both physically with the shuttle, but also internally at NASA. There were no egos involved at all, just a heartfelt, down-to-the-person desire to understand what they could do better to avoid any tragedies in the future. For those who don't know, the Columbia accident happened because a piece of foam fell off the big orange tank, which is the external fuel tank of the shuttle configuration, during the launch of Columbia. It was a big enough piece and it hit the leading edge of the wing of the shuttle, and it created a hole in the shuttle wing. Nobody was aware of it at that time, but 16 days later, when Columbia was coming through the Earth's atmosphere, hot plasma gases from the atmosphere were able to enter into the wing through that hole and eventually disintegrated the shuttle in the Earth's atmosphere. These foam fragments have been shearing off the shuttles for years. After the Columbia accident, NASA came under intense scrutiny from the media and from Congress to understand what had happened. You see, it turned out that engineers years earlier had flagged these foam fragments as an issue, as a major risk. But the shuttle, NASA's leadership was under intense pressure to continue to keep on track with their schedule at all costs. So they chose to take that risk and move on. There had been no consequences after all, and over time, it became an accepted norm to accept these foam fragments as just a standard part of launch. I can tell you that my brother believed in the crew that was on the ground to keep him safe. In fact, my last conversation with my brother was on just this topic. I asked him if he was nervous. It was his first flight. And he said, nope. Well, actually, he was very nervous, but for the positive ways. He had adrenaline going. He was an experienced pilot, but he had no concerns about his safety because the ground crew and everybody at NASA believed that Dad would be safe. Likewise, after the accident, everybody I met, to a person, was focused on safety. And not just because of the accident, but it was clear that this was a standard part of their process and their internal organization. Safety was a top priority. So the question is this: how did a foam problem migrate from one where it was considered a high-risk situation years earlier to a conscious decision by NASA's leaders across many departments to go ahead and accept this risk? The answer is something called groupthink. This particular situation at NASA is a classic case of groupthink, which is a common reality in companies of every size. It is a direct result of the organization's culture. Teams will follow the behavior of their leaders and their peers when it comes to decision making. In a recent speech, astronaut Mark Kelly, who's a good friend of my brother's, talked about the changes going on at NASA since the accident. There's now a stark warning painted on the wall of Houston's Mission Control Conference Room that says, none of us is as dumb as all of us. From my perspective, it's great news to hear that NASA has taken on frontally the issues that they had internally with their culture in order to make change to reduce the risk for future space missions. But having said that, I have to respectfully disagree with the tone of this particular motto. In my opinion, this is a negative message about the risks of team collaboration. We all have to work in teams in our lives. We work with our families, we work with our friends and our networks, and of course within our work environments. The challenge is finding an approach that empowers every voice in a team to have an equal voice at the table, no matter who they are or what their role is. I've spent a lot of time at startups, and I think, based on my experience, that NASA could learn a thing or two about the world of innovative startups and the leadership traits that are required to take a small baby company and grow it into something like a Google. As a little bit of background, I've spent the past 25 years of my career working at technology startups. In the early parts of my career, I was an employee. I eventually moved into executive management roles. I founded my own company. And today, I'm an investor and I mentor hundreds of entrepreneurs here in Central Florida as they go off and start their entrepreneurial journeys. Startups are unique because they are dealing with critical challenges that larger organizations often don't have to deal with. Things such as negative cash flow. It's normal to actually be losing money at a startup in the early years. Rapid product development and prototyping with small, tight teams and an accelerated pace. And when they do find traction and growth, then they get to grow their companies very quickly with rapid hiring and the building and architecture of business processes from the ground up. The language of startups reflects the reality that they're in a race to get to break even before they run out of cash. Because when they run out of cash, they die. To succeed, they must create a high value factor for their customers to compete in markets that are entrenched with established larger companies. And they have to do that as a tiny baby company with no track record of success. Some of the most innovative business processes out there have spawned from the world of startups. Ultimately, these startups are the business crucible that is the true challenge of a company. Terms such as agile development, lean startup, customer discovery, minimally viable product, and fail fast and learn. This is the language that we talk in as startup leaders. So what I'd like to do now is go through some 5 leadership tips that I've learned in my career that I thought might be helpful to some or all of you. So first of all, and some of these were brought up in the video. In fact, I should just stop now and play the video again because it's reiterating much of what you've already heard, but I think it's important to go through them maybe from the perspective of if you have a small company, might be really helpful. So first of all, lead by serving. What this means is, as a leader, your job is not to hold meetings or to be a top-down decision maker, but instead clear out the roadblocks for your team and allow them to get their jobs done in a highly efficient way and empower them to move forward with what you've asked them to do. When you ask a team, and this happens all the time at startups, to work long hours to meet deadlines, the last thing they need is distractions as a bureaucracy and operational grind and meetings. Well-managed startups are inherently lean. Leadership does everything they can to clear out those roadblocks to optimize the bandwidth of their small, lean teams. And a segue to this also is that, to the lead by serving, is arrogance kills innovation. If you're an arrogant leader or if you're working for somebody that might have a little bit of an ego, it can become problematic when you're trying to motivate and inspire a team. And this is particularly true at startups, where you're asking a group of highly passionate, very smart people to build something novel that must attempt to compete with large established competitors. Experienced startup founders and leaders learn early on that because they get their butt kicked a few times when they're out there trying to get their first customers, to be humble, to be empathetic, to be consistent in how they're leading their teams. Number 4, create a culture of empowerment. Culture. How many of you actually lead teams or companies? What do you think, sorry, I can't see you. What do you think happens when you leave the room or you go on a vacation or you're out for a few weeks with a personal issue? What's going on at your company or with your team? Are they moving full steam ahead and working as hard as they can? Are they inspired, even though you're not in the room with them, to get their jobs done? Are they passionate about your organization? Or is there a lot of back channel chatter going on about, what a crummy work environment they have, or how they're constantly being pulled off task to go do, things that really aren't work that's helping them move their task forward. That's a key litmus test around whether you or your organization is working within a culture of empowerment. Companies of any size will thrive with leadership and a culture that empowers employees to do the right thing for the company and customers, no matter what their formal role is. More importantly, creating a culture of empowerment creates a very strong customer commitment to the company, or from the company, and because employees are motivated and given permission to do what's right to serve a customer or a colleague or a partner without having to go get permission from their boss, even if it's not in their job description. In companies that are managed this way, employees will come to work for you and they'll even take a lesser salary and take less money to come work in these environments in 99% of the cases. Number 3, customer discovery. On the panel previously, I heard a couple of tidbits that align with this. So follow the journey as if you're the turtle, teach or create experiences as if you're the student, not the teacher. This is what this is all about. Immerse yourself in your customer's journey. And when I'm talking about customers, it's not just the customers that are buying your service or your products. Your customers could be your employees, your partners, your investors, anybody who's a stakeholder in your organization. Think about their journey. If you're an executive at a company and you're looking to build out business processes, take time to walk through the journey of the front desk administrator and see what his or her day is like. That's how you build good process and good organizational best practices to really drive an organization that's serving customers. Number 2, diversity obviously is a huge topic out there these days on the media. And so when I talk about diversity here, I'm talking about more than the demographics and gender and sexual orientation type of topics that are out there in the media. We all know that those must be addressed. But in addition, I'm talking about diversity of opinions, diversity in your business processes. So when it comes to opinions, again, as I mentioned earlier, your front desk administrators or some of your young student interns that might be working with your companies, you'd be surprised how much knowledge they have or fresh ideas they have around what could be done differently in your organizations to improve both internally and externally. Don't be shy, don't be afraid, don't be scared to actually invite them to the table. You might be surprised at what you as a senior executive can learn from everybody in your organization. And last but not least, passion. I heard that again in the video just a minute ago. No matter what role you're in at your organization, you have to love what you do. Life is just too short. And you hear this all the time. Maybe it sounds like rhetoric, but as part of maybe your time here at the conference, take some time to reflect. If you're in a leadership position, do you love your company or your organization? Are you passionate about its mission? Is it something that you wake up in the middle of the night going, oh my God, this is awesome? Or is it a grind? Is it bureaucratic? Is it stale? If you love what you do, if you're an employee of this organization, all those things resonate, but also do you feel like you have a voice at the table? Do you feel empowered? If you are one of the younger folks or more junior folks at your organizations, and the answer is no, you're not feeling empowered, take a risk, raise your hand, try to be a voice at the table, suggest ideas to your peers and to your management team, and see how they react. You might be surprised. If they don't react well, maybe you're in a situation back to the NASA with the groupthink, and maybe it's not the right place for you. Because most importantly, passion is what will drive innovation and drive a company's growth and success. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time today and for the invitation. Thank you, Bettina, and everybody else at T.